It's already been expressed. We are indeed thankful for everyone that's here, and especially our visitors at this time. I hope that you'll be able to be kept safe while you're here, and on your travel home today, you'll be kept safe as well. We're blessed when people visit us who love the Lord and want to worship God as we do, and you encourage us by your presence, and I hope we've edified ourselves by participating in our worship service this day. I don't know about you, but have you made reservations and resolutions and whatever that might be in your life? I hate to ask you this, but it's a week into your resolution. Have you stopped it yet? 70% over 75% of people will quit what they resolved to do in 3 months. 11% will keep it for a year or more. And most of us won't do it. So we sometimes can learn about resolutions by looking at other people's resolutions. It's been said that why do we begin our resolutions and make those resolved at the beginning of a year? Because it's a fresh start. And we're not in 2022, we're in 2023. It is a fresh start, and therefore that's a good thing. That's good that you are making this resolve when you are beginning a fresh. It's a freshness. It's kind of like I'm going to start the diet on Monday. Monday's a fresh start. And that's good in itself. I've also learned that it is good to write down your resolutions, just to kind of say them. That's not really effective. What you need to do is to write down what your goal is. And why were we using goal? Because, see, some people don't like the word resolution. It's too much of an oath. I'd rather have a goal. You may be planning for failure, I don't know. And you realize, let your words be few, as we see in Ecclesiastes 5. And God holds us responsible for our oaths. So some of that's kind of like I resolve. I'm going to do that. I'm a promise. No, it's just a goal. So let's just write down our goals. But let's write them down. And you know, it's not really good just to have a bunch of goals out there. You need to realize, what is the plan that I'm going to handle this? Maybe I'm going to spend one day that I'm not going to partake of that thing that I need to get out of my life. Sugar, cold drinks, soft drinks, whatever that might be. I got to eliminate that, but my plan is, if I can just last through one day without that, that's pretty good. That's a plan. And that's good. And you know, you can have a goal and you can have a plan, but if you never put it into action. So let's get started Monday morning. Fresh start. And even if we failed the first week, fresh start. And so I learned a lot about what people say about resolutions. And it's kind of easy that way. I didn't make one. If I wanted to, that might be some good advice that I would make. But I mean, that's 75% maybe, and I don't want to fail, so I'm just going to, maybe I'll think about something. That's what I wish I could do, and leave it like that. But I sure do learn a lot about resolutions by seeing those who are involved in doing that. This morning, I'm going to take you by invitation to Luke the 16th chapter. And we're going to, Jesus wants us to do this. Jesus wants us to see a man make a resolution. He's resolved to do something in Luke the 16th chapter and verse 4. What we learned leading up to this is there was a rich man. And Jesus is now opening the story for us. There's a rich man. So we're out here looking at a rich man, but he had a steward. He had one that was overseeing his housely affairs, overseeing his finances, overseeing his business. And the word came back to the rich man that this steward was wasting his goods. He heard about that. So with a lack of trust now, he wants him to come and verbally give account of his stewardship, because you're no longer going to be a steward for me. And we just pause there and say, that's kind of cruel, isn't it? You don't even let the fella give a reason for things. He kind of believed that. And when you can't trust a steward, you want to have somebody you can trust, but here's things coming back to him. I want to have give an account of that. Well, the steward then begins to realize, I've been an unrighteous steward. And what he begins to do is think about things. He thinks about his circumstances. That I'm getting ready to be put out of my stewardship, and I'm planning ahead. What's going to happen to me when I'm not employed by him doing this particular work? I don't have the strength to dig. I'm not strong enough to dig. Maybe he doesn't have the energy to try. But I'm ashamed to beg. You know, a guy's got pride, you know. So I resolved to do this. And then we're saying, what did you resolve to do? Let me pause there. There's not a resolution that you ever make that didn't involve your circumstances in life. You think about it. You don't just dream up something. It's all affecting your life. And you're being honest and you want to accomplish things. His resolve is surrounding his circumstances. And what he realizes, I'm going to be put out. So I need a place to stay. So I am going to go to the people who owe my master something. They're indebted to him. And I'm going to say, how much do you owe? And he goes to one of them, you owe 100 measures of oil. That's 900 gallons of oil, probably olive oil. I want you to sit down and quickly, because we got to get this handled quickly. He's got energy to get things done. Write down 50 measures. Just cut it down to 400. 400 gallons. See, he has him write it down. He's not exchanging money. Writing down, because this will be the record he could give. This is what they owe you. That's my last bill of stewardship. He just cheated him out of 50%. How many measures of wheat am I here? Pay. I owe the master 100. Well, you write down 80 measures. That's about 800 bushels. That's better than 1,000 for me, who's indebted to your master. And it's when we see that particular story set forth that he's going to be bringing back the IOUs. And and what we find that this is an unrighteous steward. And Lord, you want me to look at the resolve of an unrighteous steward? What do you mean by this, Jesus? And yet Jesus invites us to see this man make his resolve. In fact, he brings a story to our forefront. He's an unrighteous steward. And Jesus, in this story, the master commends him. This is commendable. Well, his master's going to get something out of this, and he probably doesn't know the difference. He's been trusting his steward. But a steward is dishonest. He's unrighteous. But he commends him because he indeed acted wisely. Some of your translations have the word, he was shrewd. He acted shrewdly. Jesus is really wisdom that you would love, that you want us to follow. It's just to be shrewd. This man was shrewd because he realized maybe these guys, because I did them a favor, will then allow me to stay home with them a little bit. Maybe they'll invite me into their home because I did such a good deal with them. I'm dishonest to my master, but he already knew I was. And all the circumstances in his life made him make this resolve of what he would do, and he did. And then we scratch our head Jesus, how come this would be commendable to you? How come wisdom is just being shrewd according to this world's terms? How come you want me to look at a resolution made by an unrighteous person? We scratch our head and we ask the questions, and the story stops. We don't know what happened. We don't know if the plan worked. You know, we're talking about worldly things. How many of those people returned favor and said, you can stay with me? You don't have a place to go. We don't know if that happened. That's what he was thinking. That was all of his thinking. He's thinking from the standpoint of this world. Jesus doesn't commend the world and worldliness, but he latches on to two things. And when we look at what he latches on as, he makes two comments. And he says, well, the master commended him. He was shrewd. Jesus does comment, for the sons of this world, for their own generation, are wiser. They're wiser than the sons of light. He distinguishes sons of light. Here are my followers. Here are you Christians. It's you and me. We're not living like the world. But the sons of the world, I wanted you to look at the resolutions. I want you to look at the resolve of a very worldly man. You know what I see in that? Sometimes for their own generation, they are wiser because they put things together to accomplish their goals. They see what they have as a resource, they have what leverage they have, and they use it to accomplish their goals. In that sense, they're wiser than the sons of light in their generation. The second comment he makes, make to yourselves friends by means of the mammon of unrighteousness. That's this money we use in this world. That we buy things and we kind of keep the commerce going. And I know that he wanted to make friends by doing his unrighteousness and that sort of thing. You're not commending that. No, I want you to make yourselves friends by means of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when it fails, these friends may receive you in eternal tabernacles. Those are the two things that Jesus latches onto in his parable of the unrighteous servant and unrighteous steward. And when we think about the word eternal tabernacles, he's raising our thoughts. He's raising us to think about things that are everlasting, aren't they? And all of a sudden, the sons of light need, that's you and me, we need to focus on something that's eternal, that lies ahead, that's part of our circumstance in life, that the world does not look forward to. But we need to understand it's there, it's real. It's our circumstance. We need to be looking for the eternal tabernacles and use this money we have in our resources in light of obtaining that goal. So eternal tabernacles are eternal abiding places. Did Jesus talk about that? He did. When his disciples were despondent because of his recognizing his death, in John 14 and verse 2, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God, be also in me. In my Father's house are many tabernacles, or many abiding places, many mansions. All it means is abiding places. If it were not so, I would have told you. But I go to prepare a place for you. And he'll come again to receive us unto himself, that we may be with him. And to be with him in those eternal abiding places. Jesus has taken what he wanted out of that story, without commending all the things that are done, and said, well, you're wiser than the sons of light, so let's become shrewd businessmen. See, you may not be able to read a spreadsheet. You may not be able to invest your money the way CEOs of hedge funds do. You may not have that ability, but you can think in the things of eternal that's far greater than the unrighteous mammon. He says, I just want you to use that in terms of eternal abiding places. That's what our focus is upon. That man wasn't thinking like that. He's thinking about the house 3 blocks over, or 3 farm spaces over. Where it's these guys had a place, and I'm not going to have one. I can't work and I can't beg. He was shrewd. He cut the prices. And those guys don't like it. Well, they all like me, but we're not told what happens there. Jesus gets a hold of this. We think about eternal tabernacles, and we think about true riches. True riches. Because the riches that we're looking at will never fail. But the unrighteous mammon, it will fail. In verse 11, we'll be able to say when it fails, we'll have the true riches in heaven that they do not fail. What do you mean do not fail? Look at Luke the 12th chapter and verse 33. Because we just go back a few chapters, we see the form of this word that is the idea of failing. And we're to set our treasures, our heart and our treasures in heaven. This verse says, thieves don't break through and steal, and the moth doesn't cause any rust. But make for yourselves these little things that hold money. It might be a billfold, might be a pouch, might be a basket you might hold, but you make for yourself that don't wear out. And these treasures will not fail. They will not fail, because money will fail. You won't take it with you. You're only looking at the things of this world. You won't be able to take that with you at all. It will be left behind. And so he wants us to not fear, little flock. He wants us to realize what is going to be happening in the future, and these things will not fail. That's where your true riches are. And it's in eternal tabernacles. Now, they can give you a place to stay. You may be able to make some more money in an unrighteous way or in a righteous way. But we know that it will fail. But God's riches, God's promise of glories of heaven will never fail. And your pocketbook will never grow old. And you begin to focus on the right things. That becomes your circumstance. And we see he did good by thinking ahead. The word resolve there is where it's just to know. In fact, it's translated most of the time know in our Bible. He knew what he had to do. And it was critical time. And maybe you shouldn't make resolutions when it's such a critical time for you. Or maybe you should. Maybe you'll hold to them. I tell you, he did. We don't know how it worked out for him, but we know how it's going to work out for us. So what he says, you be looking at the true riches that will not fail, and look at eternal abiding places that are eternal, that don't go by the wayside. You be faithful with the little you have. That's the money you have, the resources you have, what is in your billfold, what's in your purse, what you have hid under the bed or in a particular hiding place in your house. What little you have, you use it. Because he says, I want you to establish friends. They will be inviting you into eternal tabernacles. So they've got the friends that are going there, but they just got a good deal. That doesn't mean what they're going to do for their so-called friend. He wasn't righteous, but we're talking about righteous people. It's not saying that you get up there and you've got a big enough mansion that you can invite some loved ones in when they come across the portals of heaven. They don't own tabernacles up there. Jesus made them. But they're going to be there. Maybe because of your influence. Matthew 5 and verse 16, we're to let our light shine in the world. We're not to hide from the world. We're in this world, but we don't have to be unrighteous. And just because we have riches doesn't mean they're evil. But in comparison to the riches we have before us, the unrighteous mammon, this stuff, we're just using it. For what purpose? Our resources that belong to us, we think, we're using that. Well, let your light shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. Not you, but glorify your Father who is in heaven. That you use your resources, my house, my food, my money, at a time when maybe someone needs help. They could be a stranger. But you do that. What happens? 1 Peter, the 2nd chapter and verse 12. There are people that of the world they'll call you evil. But when the Lord comes back again in visitation of bringing forth the judgment of God and save us from our bodies and redeem us so forth into heaven, they indeed will glorify the Father in that day because of you. Don't know how it happened. Don't know what the person did. But they just let their light shine. And they may have been of help to them. That somehow they're going to be your friends in heaven. Through you focusing on what's important, what resources you had, and it may be very little. You use what you have for the glory of God and fulfill His purposes. What is part of the glory of God? In Matthew 25, here are brethren, the very least of the brethren. When we saw them sick, we saw them naked, we saw them sick, and maybe sick in prison. And we saw all those things, and they needed help. It may have taken resources, not just time. We spent our time with them, but they may needed help. And you took care of that need. Jesus says, you did it unto me when you did it unto the least of my brethren, and you will enter into the kingdom of God, everlasting tabernacles, abiding places. And if you do not do that, you may never have committed adultery. You may never swindled your boss. You may have been a good father and a good husband, good wife. May have done a lot of things, but you did not do something. And that was connected with your brethren. That's part of glorifying God. There'll be everlasting punishment for you at the end of that chapter. And you'll be in the dwelling place with Satan and the devil. That is a very sobering thought. That says, you know what I have, I might need to share this week with somebody that doesn't have something in this church or people I know. Paul says to those who are rich, comparatively speaking, in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 18 and 19, that we are to do good works. We should be willing to communicate and distribute and communicate. You're sharing your funds. You're distributing it to where it has need. So you might lay hold on life, which is life indeed. May I say true riches? It's life indeed. It's the heavenly picture of our circumstance. We want to go there. Is that your resolve this year? Well, I'll wait that when I'm in hospice care. No, Jesus says, see this man's resolve? Brethren, you do it now. This is what you need to focus on. This is the shrewdness that he has. Will you be shrewd enough to use your money to the glory of God and his purposes? To drive that home a little bit more, if we're not faithful and using unrighteous mammon as we should, we'll realize that we are just indeed stewards of what God has given us. And notice in these two verses, he speaks, well, who's going to give you the true riches if you're not faithful, what you have? Who would that might be? And if you're not faithful to that which belonged to another, who's going to give you your own riches? Who did it belong to? God. He wants us to see that. That we are stewards of what he has given to us. You see those 2 points in verses 11 through 12. And what do we see leading up to verse Timothy 6, 18, 19, verse 17? He gives us all things to enjoy. Share it. He gives us all things to enjoy. Who gave us that? God. Share it. Distribute it. Communicate, share it with others. Lay hold on the true riches, life which is life indeed. That's what rich people ought to do. And comparatively speaking, in our time and in our world today, you are rich, brothers and sisters in Christ, compared to the world. And so we need to take hold of that. Even the Old Testament, God feared that when the people would come into the land that was promised to them, and they would have all these blessings, that they would forget God. Don't need God. I've gotten all this wealth, and you think you got this wealth. In Deuteronomy 8 and verse 18, it's God who gave you the power to have wealth. How much, how little you have is because of God's blessings. And what we need to understand is that I will not be given true treasures, true riches, if I haven't been faithful as a steward to what God has given me. He's not advocating unrighteous stewardship. He latched on to two things in that story. And then he tells us what we should be thinking about. What should be our reality, the circumstances surrounding us. The world doesn't see it that way. But what God does, he invites us in to see the resolve of a fellow that was really wise of his time. We need to be wise for eternity. And so it closes this section where the Jews are indeed, the Pharisees, they scoff when they hear this because they were what? Lovers of money. And we have to make up our mind, am I going to serve God? Am I going to be a steward of what he gives me? Or I'm going to chase after and satisfy my love for money? You can't have two masters, he says. You'll love the one, hate the other, hold the one, despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. I'm going to serve God. My resources are to your glory, O God. And I'm going to make friends for heaven with the resources that I have. Has that been in your plans, your goal, your resolutions? It should be our focus. So I'm looking at a new year. And whatever resolution I make for this life, that's fine, but I've got to have a bigger one. And I encourage you this year to expand your focus. Not just on 2023, 2024, only 11% in 2024 will have kept it. No, we got to keep this one. We want to expand our resolve for eternity. The goal is to go to heaven and enjoy the eternal riches in the everlasting abiding places. And hope that the influence we have will have some friends there that maybe by our care, our concern, they will glorify God at the day of visitation too. And the plan is, use all my resources to God's glory. That's the big picture. That means I'll take care of my family, take care of my kids. But my resources are going to be used. How can I glorify God and how I use my resources? Because that should be our resolve. And we don't want to be an unrighteous steward. And I tell you what, I think we need to begin it now, today. That'd be a good time to put it into practice, wouldn't it? This is what sons of light ought to look like and shine like. But what about you that are not Christians this morning yet? You haven't become a Christian yet. You think about eternity. The song we're about to sing, written 1896 by Peter Hostauth, and Phil Moore did he was working for them in their music place, and he was in Cincinnati. Wrote the tune to that, Phil Moore did. But a lot of the songs that I've sung, we don't have all 5 verses. But to those of you who have made the commitment of thinking about eternity and to follow Jesus Christ as a Christian, I'm resolved, all the things, the glitter of this world, I'm resolved to turn away from all of that. All it is glitter. All the things of this world. I don't want to love the world any longer. I want to come to Christ. I want to follow Christ. And I want to go to heaven. And that 5th verse that comes along there is, I am resolved, and who will go with me? Come, friend, without delay. Taught by the Bible, led by the Spirit. We'll walk in the heavenly way. Use your resources, and what's on your mind is the fact that I want to have friends that maybe I've influenced for good, maybe helped along the way with the resources I have. I want them to meet me. I want to meet them. I'm not going to their house. God prepared all of us a place to abide forever. He prepares for us the abiding places. He has given us our resources. Will we be a righteous steward? And I hope our resolve is, yes, I don't want to linger. I may have foes within, without. Friends may oppose me. But I've made my desire. I'm going to follow the Lord. I'm going to heaven. I resolve to do that. If that's on your heart and your mind, let us help you begin that walk with Him to heaven by obeying the gospel this very morning as we stand and sing this song of encouragement.